This conference is now being recorded.
Welcome to the New York State Association School Business Officials webinar. Today's program is the Effective Business Office. Your host for today is Donna Clement, Director of Professional Development with New York State ASBO. Operator assistance is available at any time during this conference by pressing £0. A question and answer session will follow the presentation. You may send chat questions during the presentation using the chat window indicated by a speech bubble icon located to the right of the presentation. Please address chat questions to the Q&A group using the drop-down list located at the bottom of the chat window. Without further ado, I want to turn the call over to our host. Donna, please begin.
Thank you, Michelle, and welcome everyone to our webinar and talking about the Effective Business Office, part of the Educational Enterprise Organization and Administration online course. We have two presenters today. They will be introducing themselves. Encourage you to ask questions. Make sure that the information we're providing is helpful to you, and it's always a nice compliment to presenters if you can ask a question. We're going to begin with Peter Weber. He's the Dean of the Educational Enterprise Standard, and he's going to talk about the Organization and Administration course.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this session, which, as Donna said, is part of the New York ASBO strand covering educational enterprise. We hope to be able to provide you some insights and lead you to think of different ways to manage your responsibilities, particularly in the face of ever-increasing demands and what we are now all coming to accept, declining resources. Today, we're focusing on a single element, and this relates to organization of staff and duties. We're going to discuss two traditional approaches with you today and one newer model. And all the time, please keep in mind the reminders that we keep getting from the New York State Comptroller's Office about internal security. This is about who does what, and not surprisingly, who takes on the responsibility when the person who's supposed to be doing the work is out. We hope that you will find one or a combination of the tools we're going to talk about today useful. I do want you to keep in mind that what we're discussing today is going to sound like more work for you and sound like more work for your staff. And we're going to talk about that as well as we go on, but we realize the day is already full. So with no further ado, I'm going to turn over the opening to Mike Sanangelo, coming to us from Schenectady, who's going to take us through the early slides. Mike?
Well, thank you, Peter, and good afternoon to everyone. We want to begin by looking at some of the issues that are surrounding the job descriptions and some advantages and disadvantages. The first thing that we want to do on the first slide that was up there is just call to your attention again and review what the webinar is about. And you probably had an opportunity to look at that, but we're going to talk about organizational charts and job descriptions and procedural manuals in general. And I'm going to probably go through most of the organizational chart and the job description, and then turn it back to Peter for the procedural manuals. So on the next slide, it shows the assignments that some of you may be participating with. You probably already had an opportunity to look at some of those, but we will ask you to submit to us various documents, as you see here throughout the webinars, and just put this here before we actually begin, just so you have reference to where we're going on this. So let's begin on the first slide, which is labeled independent contractor versus employee. I thought that this might be a good place to start because we are talking about job descriptions, and we will be talking about organizational charts. And typically, when we do that, we are talking obviously about employees. And so we wanted to get started early on with making that distinction, or at least looking at some issues that face, at least from the IRS point of view, what an employee is versus an independent contractor. And I'm sure that all of you probably at one time or another have dealt with this issue in your office. But I think it sets the stage so we understand what an employee is. So the IRS looks at three categories to determine if you have an employee or a independent contractor. And all of this information, by the way, you can find on the IRS website. And if you look in particular there under Form SS8, that's SS8, the IRS website, it will highlight everything that I'm going to talk about on this slide, and it gives you a form that you can go through to help determine if you have an independent contractor that's working or an employee. So one of the first things that the IRS looks at is behavioral control. Who's in control? Is it the person, the supervisors, the management, or is it the actual person that's doing the work? Where is the work performed? Is it performed in your office, or can this person do the work someplace else? Obviously, if it can be done elsewhere outside of your office, you might have a situation where you have an independent contractor and not an employee. It also looks from a behavioral point of view of how the task is accomplished and what particular type of knowledge might be needed and who actually is controlling what this individual is doing. And then it also looks at financial controls. Is there an investment that needs to be made by this individual to perform the work that's being done? If so, then again, you may have an independent contractor and not an employee. Who pays for business costs? Are you paying for the cost to have this person do work? Are you paying for the computers? Are you paying for the space for this person to do the work? It might be an employee in that case. Otherwise, again, it may be an independent contractor and not an employee. How is the person that's doing the work paid? Is he or she paid by the hour, a flat fee? Is there a project cost that's being paid? Is there any opportunity for profit? And obviously, if there is some opportunity for profit, you're probably working with an independent contractor, not an employee. The third thing here is the relationship. Is there some sort of contractual agreement? Are benefits paid? And is there what is the termination policy? Can you how do you terminate the relationship should you need to do that? And these things, I'm sure, as I said at the beginning, are very important. There are also things I'm sure that you have looked at and probably dealt with. And again, I just bring them to your attention here just as a beginning point so that we know what an employee is versus an independent contractor. So if we go to the next slide, these are just some items about, on the next slide, about job descriptions and things to be concerned or to think about when you're dealing with job descriptions. Are we on the next slide, Donna? All right, well, I'll continue. All right. One of the things on the job descriptions is that there has to be a foundation. They are used as a foundation for interview questions. In other words, whatever is printed on this job description, you obviously could use in hiring someone. You want to use it actually to hire because it should spell out and will spell out, if done correctly, all of those important aspects of the job. And so it becomes a very useful tool when you're trying to hire employees. Also, it's useful for when you're doing job reviews, and hopefully that is occurring in all of the offices, because you want to make sure that there is some sort of accountability for employees and what they're asked to do. And the job description is a very good place to start when you want to do the evaluation or review of an employee's performance. Obviously, to highlight the certain things that you expect to be done and how that employee has carried out those tasks. It can also be, the job description can also be a legal documentation of duties. In case you have a situation where you need to explain to someone why you have asked an employee to do certain things or responsibilities, and if you have a job description, then that can be used as a tool. You can use it as a tool to help explain and document why you are asking employees to do what you're asking them to do. And I think it also, to a certain extent, attempts and helps to discourage those sort of responses. And again, I'm sure most of us have heard this, that's not my job. And I think if you have things in your job description which pretty specifically talk about what you expect from the employee, then there is at least probably less of an incident where someone may say, well, it's not my job, because you could obviously point to some of those items and say, yes, here it is in your job description, and by all means, it is part of your job. And to a certain extent, it forms a picture with the detail that's included in the job description. I think it shows the employee, obviously, the duties, but also tries to put in perspective, I think, as just where this employee may fit in to the organization. And as I've said or alluded to, certainly the job description can be used to help establish some of the expectations that you have for employees. Certainly as far as the duties go, timelines, reports that you're expecting to have completed, all of those things you're assisted by using a job description and helping to establish those expectations. Now, on the next slide, there's just some things I wanted to think about or consider that obviously before you have to develop a job description. You can't have them, obviously, until you develop them. And certainly one of the ways to do that is to, there are a number of ways, I suppose, but certainly you want to make sure you have the appropriate staff working on developing job descriptions. You may have a supervisor that would prepare the job description for his or her department, or you may ask the employee that's in the current the job to help you or assist you with that. But one way or the other, you need to make sure you have the appropriate staff people working on job descriptions, those that are knowledgeable about what not only this job does, but how it fits into the organization or the department. I think that's a very important aspect. So, again, when you're developing job descriptions, make sure that you have the appropriate staff people working and helping you with that. And then the second thing is you need to do a job analysis. You need to be able to realize exactly what the person is doing. What are the responsibilities of the current employees that are in the job or similar jobs? And you may want to do some research on the internet or talking to colleagues to find out what's in a job description, a similar job in their school district, so that you have a comprehensive type of approach to analyzing what the person should be doing and how you can work that into a job description. Of course, you'll want to include and analyze the duties, the responsibilities, that a person would need in filling the position. As I mentioned, you certainly could check with other school districts, but even to enlarge that or broaden it, you could check with for some of the jobs that we have in the business office, certainly with other organizations, outside organizations. Of course, many of the things that get done in the business office, payroll, accounts payable, very similar to private organizations and other organizations. So you certainly have an opportunity to reach out, seek out others when developing your job descriptions and your job analysis. And I think all of that kind of comes together, and then you're able to write the job description from all of the analysis and with the appropriate staff. And one of the things after you write the description, you certainly want to make sure then test it. You want to look at it. You want to evaluate it on a regular basis to make sure it's fresh and that it reflects exactly what you expect from the person in that position. You know, the job description itself, and we'll look a little bit in more detail next, but also it should include a lot of different aspects about the job. And on the next slide, we have a beginning. I think we're at what to include. There we go. And obviously, one of the first things you want to do in a job description is look at the title. You need to include that. You need to clarify the job title, the rank or level. You need to look at all of those aspects of the job. And then, of course, a very important aspect is to include something about salary. You may want to have like the low end of the scale, the mid scale, the high. You should also include information if there's any additional compensation that goes with this job. You certainly want to indicate if it's exempt or non-exempt according to the Fair Labor Standards Act, and you want to make sure that all of that information, maybe there's a stipend that you expect in this position for individuals to do some related tasks. So anything to do about salary or how much this individual will be earning is certainly something that you want to include in your job description. And then, of course, the purpose or the objective. You want to, it's a general statement usually, and maybe just a few sentences, but you want to include something there about the purpose and the objective of the position itself. And then certainly in there's should be a description of the roles that the employee will hold. It should include any supervisory roles and how this individual fits into the larger structure, not only for the department possibly, but also for the organization as a whole. And you want to include any sort of issues or concerns and show or depict anything here that would give the individual some sort of flavor for where they fit in the organization. And I didn't mean to skip over on duties, but that seems to be an obvious one. Those are the specific tasks that you expect. You try to include as much information as you possibly can. Obviously, some tasks may not be of the magnitude where you need to spell it out. It may be a very minor part of the total, less than a percentage or something, and so you don't always include everything, but you try to be as comprehensive as you possibly can. And then, of course, the personal characteristics, that includes some of the things that you might want from an individual. For instance, the ability to work under pressure or with tight schedules or deadlines, something to that effect. So you want to have some sort of anything that has to do with personal characteristics or anything that you feel might be different for this particular job. And, of course, the skills and the education, any special training, you should include here, too, if you expect any use of the computer, special software. Do you expect the person to know Microsoft Word, Excel, things like that would be very good to include to get a comprehensive job description. And then the schedule. What do you expect from this individual? What do you expect this person to work? How many hours? Is it a regular 8-hour day, 7.5? Might there be evening work? Things of that nature. And so, and you also, along with that, where is the individual going to work? Sometimes it's most of the time, very important to individuals to know where they're going to work. I know here at Schenectady, we try to keep our job descriptions somewhat generic in the sense of, for certain positions, for instance, custodians, use that as an example. We have 20 buildings, and obviously we don't want to put something in a description which would limit what the custodian could do or where he or she could be assigned to work. So we're careful to try to leave it wide open as a district-wide position so that we can move people easier as the need arises. And then the last thing on this slide is the other duties as assigned. I'm sure you have that in any of your documents probably, or seen that, and I'm sure you're writing that for any people in your office too. But it's very important because, as I mentioned, you try to highlight the duties in the job description, but there will always be those things that arise that maybe don't happen often, but that you just did not include. And so you're covering you yourself, the district, the organization, by putting in there other duties as assigned. And most of the time, as long as those duties are within the general scope and nature of the type of work that's being performed, there will not be a problem by putting that in there. And you can refer to that when you need it and as often as you need it.
And as an editorial comment, please keep in mind these documents are publicly available. They are easily foilable. They will turn up during employee disciplinary proceedings. They may turn up during lawsuits. So as you look at it, keep in mind this is something that other people are going to see. And once you've committed to this, you should commit to updating it, both because there's some job creep or a job contraction that may come in, or the actual duties that you expect the person to perform will change over time.
Very good. Thank you, Peter. That's good advice. If we turn to the next slide, I've included this too because I want to give you some indication of the importance of job descriptions. And if you haven't already done so, or if you're not familiar, you can go out to the New York State Education Department website, and you can find out there an evaluation checklist, which includes a lot of different things. Job description's only one part of it, but it's an evaluation tool that's out there for you to use in your office, which is something that the State Education Department has put together, help you to evaluate how your office is organized and doing, and certain internal controls, etc. So this one in particular that I picked out is on job descriptions. And it is from the State Education Department, and you can see there that the standard here is that one of the most important responsibilities is to provide each employee with an outline of the duties. And these outlines take the form of position guides and job descriptions. So, the State Education Department is telling us the importance of it, and certainly, they have it. They evaluate. If they come in and look at your office, they're going to check and make sure or look for to see if you have adequate job descriptions for the employees in your organization. And You'll notice here, we'll talk a little bit more, but under the position guides, it gives you some information. You can certainly take your time and look at that at some other time. And then on the job description piece below, it talks about job descriptions being developed by individuals with civil service status and who are subject to a rather rigid classification system. So, again, I think we're focusing on employees and job descriptions, and we made the distinction between a employee and a independent contractor, and I think we are making a distinction to a certain extent in today's webinar when talking about job descriptions. Although hopefully it's generic enough to include all employees, I think really the emphasis here is on those civil service employees that you may have in your office, not necessarily your certificated teachers or administrators, although certainly some of the things we've discussed are pertinent to their job descriptions, just as they would be to civil service employees as well. And so that leads me into the next slide, which focuses somewhat on New York State civil service. And I'm sure in your jurisdiction, whoever governs your civil service employees, you've had the opportunity to either see or be involved with or participate or complete documents or forms from your civil service commission. And, that's on the local level. This first slide here talks about the New York State civil service and goes on to explain who comes under that. Again, I don't necessarily want to read this to you. It's there for you to look at a later time. And you can go out to the New York State Civil Service website and you can find a wealth of information out there, really, about employees, civil service, and a lot of different things out there. Now, most of us are not governed necessarily directly by New York State Civil Service, but we are governed by our local, if you go to the next slide there, and I put in a couple slides here just so that you can, there you go, that you could be familiar with and just know and understand, and when you're going back to review this information at a later date, just to remind you to go to your own website for your Civil Service Commission in your area and look at some of the aspects there. If you're in a position where you need to be concerned about hiring individuals, then you certainly want to be in touch and on the phone with your Civil Service Commission. If you have a new position that you're trying to put forward, it's very important that you communicate with the folks at the Civil Service Commission to help you, because they're the ones that will have to actually rule on any sort of new job that you may have. First of all, they will put a title to it. Certainly, they may ask for your suggestions, but they have the final authority on that, and then they will also determine the qualifications and what exam, if anything, that the individual filling this position may have to take. So then on the next slide there, again, is just a kind of a reminder, and you can go to websites and you can look up your own civil service department and commission. And I think you've probably all worked somewhat with or seen in your own situation what might be considered or look like a job description from civil service. But the caution on that is that typically those job descriptions that you would receive from your Civil Service Commission are very general in nature. I know as from my own experience that most of the time, if you have something like an account clerk or a senior account clerk, that job description that would come from your Civil Service Commission would be pertinent not only to your school district, but possibly the county government or some other governmental agencies within that jurisdiction. So I think what we've been talking about more today so far is the fact that you may need something more specific, because the Civil Service Commission job descriptions don't necessarily reflect what your individuals or employees are doing in your office. So they're helpful to get you started. They're certainly necessary. They're required by civil service, so you really have to have them available. However, you would want to try to come up with something a little more specific, something geared better toward your specific organization. So we're going to stop on job descriptions for right now. Peter may have some things later to follow through on that he wants to talk about. But on the next slide, I want to start talking about organization charts, which obviously we have employees, we have job descriptions, we have to organize these employees into our business offices, and our business offices have to be somehow structured or placed in a larger organization. And so we want to talk a little bit today about organization charts. And the first thing that I put down is a standard organization chart, and I'm assuming that everybody that's listening has probably in one way or another seen an organization chart. Maybe you even built one, either on paper or online or on the computer or something. But most of the time we look at organization charts, and they're lines and boxes connected together, and they're standard. They're standard organization chart, and they show a very formal appearance of the organization, and it's it tries to depict what the responsibility is in the organization, and it's a very formal. It's what has been looked at as being what is supposed to be going on in the organization, and we're going to talk a little bit about how that may suffer, not actually be the situation. And then you've probably seen some other organization charts that are more confusing. And as organizations and school districts get more complex, I think their organization charts, if you try to draw them, get also more confusing, because you have line relationship, dotted lines to this person works with another one, and before you know it, you have a very confusing type of arrangement or picture of this organization. And so what you want to attempt to do, and again, there is software available that can help you do that. You want to try to make it as you don't want it confusing. You want to try to make it as standard or straightforward as you possibly can. Now, organization charts can be used as a tool, a management tool. I mean, it certainly shows who reports to whom in the organization, usually, and again, we'll qualify that in a minute. But for the most part, it is an attempt to show what is going on in the organization and who reports to who, what responsibilities are being completed. And you certainly would be hard-pressed, I think, in any sizable organization. Certainly, a small entrepreneur may not find the organization chart to be particularly useful for his or her organization. However, as those organizations start small and grow, typically it is needed. It is something that can assist to help the organization to grow and to see who is fulfilling certain responsibilities. And in that way, it tends to help facilitate some success. It certainly, as I said, without them, I think you'd be hard-pressed to exactly know how the organization operates, but again, you need to take that with some other information before you can really say that this organization chart is showing me exactly what's going on. And certainly they're used, as we've said on a number of people say usually a picture is worth 1,000 words, and that is probably a good description of an organization chart, that it is a picture of how the organization is supposed to operate, and in that manner, helps people to see who is in the organization and how it is operating. Now, some of the things, if you will look at the next slide, and I think we can talk about some of the advantages and disadvantages. As I mentioned, typically the organization chart attempts and usually will delineate the responsibilities and the reporting that is occurring in the organization. I think it also helps in certain respect to make sure that the organization is sound. If you have an organization where you find it difficult to make an organization chart, then one may say, well, if you can't chart the organization, then maybe it's unsound or maybe it's confusing. So you should be able to, I think, within certain reason, be able to chart what your organization looks like. And if you can't do that, then that may indicate to you that it needs to be adjusted or something needs to occur. Now, the disadvantage, I think the biggest disadvantage, and we probably could all think about this, is that it doesn't always show you or recognize the informal lines and influence of people. It tends to exclude those power distribution or power structures that are inherent in every organization. And it doesn't tell you anything about the environment in which the organization is operating in. In that respect, to a certain extent, it is a misleading picture of what is going on, or at least it's not telling the whole picture. Certainly, I think all of us have seen, although possibly a secretary may have a line relationship to a supervisor or a manager, but some, I'm sure you know, some secretaries have a wealth of power if you want to get in to see a manager or a supervisor or someone at the head of the organization. So although on the organization chart he or she, the secretary, may not appear to have a high level or powerful position, certainly he or she may have that power just in the ability to get people in to see certain other individuals. So it doesn't always show you the picture as it really is. I know we recently here at Schenectady went through some reorganization of the business office effective this past July. And I know in order to facilitate the conversation and to demonstrate what we wanted to do, that we prepared organization charts of the business office. The superintendent was interested, obviously, in the Board of Education in a before and after type of picture, and so we presented that to them, and they were very useful in showing information at a glance to those folks that needed to buy into the reorganization, and so they are very, very helpful. I do think, again, the caution needs to be that they are showing the formal structure. And that may not seem to be very important, but again, I can tell you from personal experience here at Schenectady that that can be very important. We are in a situation where an employee in the organization has run into some difficulties with law enforcement, and the law enforcement wanted to see an organization chart. And certainly we were able to present that to them, and we showed them the organization chart, and it depicts very clearly who the person reports to. What it doesn't tell is some of the informal things that were occurring with the individual and other people in the organization that he was talking to, and the power that he actually had. And so internally we all understand that, this wasn't exactly the way it operates at our school district, but when the only picture we had is the organization chart, which we had to give to the law enforcement, and of course that's all they have to go by because they don't have the benefit of being on the inside and knowing exactly what's going on. So they can be important. They can be very important if you get into a situation as I just described. Now, on the next chart, slide, this is just some information that has been provided about organizational charts and some other information that can be included. And again, there's a caution here for you to consider showing or designating the backup for the person when the person's not available, and the real supervisor if that might not be depicted, again, on that organization chart. So these are some cautions that, again, for you to review as you go forward and review this material later on. And then on the next slide, once again, just like for the job descriptions, I have indicated here the checklist, New York State Education Department evaluation checklist, which is out there, and that what their take is on organization charts. And you can see here that the standard that they have defined here is that decision centers and human abilities in school organization, a chart of the organization should be developed and reviewed with frequent regularity. And many school districts have found that the very process of getting the relationship down on paper and subjecting them to frequent review has revealed weaknesses. And that's what we said earlier, that if you can't chart your organization, then you may have a weakness or a structural type of problem. And this is exactly what the New York State Education Department is looking for and expecting you to have in your business office. And so they're very important and to a certain extent required. And then on the next slide, we see here again from the New York State Education Department checklist that it is some of the things here that a well-constructed chart of the organization, and I think we've talked about some of these. We'll just run through them again. It will fix responsibility, obviously. Establishes the line of authority, who reports to whom. Helps to eliminate duplication of responsibility, which can result in some conflict. It can reveal any gaps or voids that you may have in your organization. It does show and helps to establish channels for communication. It can show the relationship within the department, within the business office. But again, as I mentioned, you always want to make sure that you show your department, your business office, as a piece of the whole school organization as well. And again, it does show a comprehensive picture of what the organizational pattern is. And then on the last next slide and last slide that I'm going to present, and then Peter's going to take over. Again, we've mentioned, and I think we want to emphasize this caution, that organizational charts do provide an overview, but they don't detail the work to be done. They don't really show what the individual is doing. It may have person's name or their title, but it does not show exactly what's being done or importantly too, how it's being done. So there's a gap in there. They list duties, but they sometimes job descriptions job descriptions list duties, but they don't necessarily specify the actual task to be done or the time frame for when the work must be done. So I think that at this point concludes my presentation on the job description and the organization chart, and I think you're going to see, and Peter's probably going to explain to you how all of this kind of fits together, and as he gets in and begins to discuss procedural manuals with you, hopefully, as he mentioned early on, hopefully you'll see how all of this fits together into a nice package. So, Peter, it's yours.
Thank you. All of us are required to have job descriptions, and all of us are required or requested to produce organization charts. School districts across the state and around the country are all different sizes and complexity. If you think about what Mike listed and what the State Education Department lists about what needs to be contained, particularly in organizational charts, you're going to wind up with a totally unreadable document. So we have some suggestions for you. The first is there's help for doing organizational charts. If you are looking to keep it really simple, and if you use Microsoft Office, whether you're in Word or you're in Excel, you can go to their help site or the Microsoft site, and there are templates that will enable you to develop reasonably attractive and easy to manipulate simple organization charts. If you want to go beyond that, there are a variety of companies that make standalone organizational chart software. And it starts off at almost no cost for the types of things you might find in the Staples or a local shop that caters to businesses, which will allow you to embed information behind the organizational chart. And most of them will allow you to insert things like pictures, backup information, telephone numbers, and things like that. If you decide you want to make the organizational chart really the linchpin of describing your organization, there are some very sophisticated programs that actually have the ability to go and extract information from your databases, so demographic information can be there in a secure way. They can go and pull and have available your job descriptions if you've got them in a place where they can be accessed. And they can provide many layers of information. And on some of the more sophisticated ones, individual managers can actually go back in and put their own notes in, which are not generally available, which would help with some of the informal network questions that Mike mentioned, such as who do you go to speak to if you need to get a certain thing done. Those tend to be very complex, and most school organizations are not going to invest in them. But we want to let you know that they're out there, because at each of these levels, you've got the ability to adapt these requirements into things that become very, very useful tools. For many of us, once we've got our job descriptions, and we hope they're up to date, and we have our organizational charts, we may have that organizational chart as one master and then broken out separate organizational charts of different departments or buildings, because those are easier to read. But we've got those. We realize that there is an entire other layer of information. And as Mike alluded to, the job descriptions and the organizational charts do not say what the actual tasks are. And so we are going to be addressing each of the 4 items that are on here, starting with the question of the whole idea of the word procedure, because for many of us, we have policies, we have regulations, we have procedures, and people get confused about some of these titles. A procedure manual in theory, flows from what's in your board policy and what's in your procedures, but it is highly specific to each job that has to be done. And while there will be overlap with people with the same titles, each individual is going to wind up with a procedure or procedures manual that exists for their own function. So what we need to figure out is, while this would be really, really nice to do, how do we do it? How do we convince people that it's worth the doing? And how to get it done accurately and really reflect all the pieces of information we want to do. And the hardest part of all of it, if we can speak to our own experiences here in Hewlett-Woodmere down on Long Island, is getting staff members to buy in. Because when we first had these discussions with our audit teams and our internal auditors, the immediate reaction from staff was one of absolute dismay. And a statement universally, people don't understand that we already have full-time jobs. And so before we leave today's conversation, we'll be talking about that, not just once, but several times. Because buy-in is absolutely essential. So if we could go to the next slide. Okay. I was informed last week that one of my staff members is going in for an operation and is likely to be out for 12 to 14 weeks. All of us are fairly used to dealing with the short-term absence. In the absence of knowing what a person does, when you get news like that, you're likely to go into panic. We're fairly along with our procedure manual development here. And so there is a litany and there is a calendar of what this person does and how. We're also in a district where we use a comprehensive financial management program. We happen to use WinCap. And in this day and age, everybody is restricted by their permissions. So even though we identify backups, many of those backups don't have access to the system, or if they have access to the system, don't have access to the specific tasks, the actual permissions to do the work. And so we'll talk a little bit about what you need to do there so you can be prepared. So our goal here is, no matter what happens, we want to know there's somebody else on staff who knows what has to be done, where to get the information, when they have to do it, who they have to get it to. And that way we figure we can survive. And we've already found that even though the project is not complete, and we recognize it may never be complete, it provides a very interesting blueprint. Next slide, please. As I said before, we're charged with carrying out the board policies. The procedure manual itself is going to stand alone, but it should be consistent. Now, we started off today talking about job descriptions. The procedures that we charge people to do should be consistent with the job descriptions that we have written for their title, or more specifically for their position. And it should be consistent with their place on the organizational chart. Next slide, please. In the procedure manual, you're going to want to start at the very, very beginning with identifying a backup person or persons for each task as it's created. Now, when you do your review of this, you as a manager may find that the backups that are designated violate internal security protocols. And if you're in a very small district, that's almost inevitable. So you need to be able to determine whether or not that backup person should be doing it. And if it's likely to create a problem for you, you need to have in mind, separate from this manual, how you're going to address that. This is particularly true in areas of purchasing and accounting, where you don't want to have the person preparing the warrants that will eventually be going forward being the same person who is issuing the purchase order, generally. But if you're in an office and you only have a few people, you're going to have to work out something different and probably put in a different approval step. So make a note to yourself as you go through this so that you don't forget this in the process. This can save you quite a bit of potential embarrassment if you find that you're in this situation, you're doing the best you can do, but you've missed, and you have a security breach. What we have here is we've got the ability to write a security profile inside of our system, designating what the rights of individuals are, and then deactivate it. And so we have a whole series of protocols ready so that when somebody is out and we look for the backup, we activate that backup security, and they have access to the permission. And as soon as they're no longer responsible for it, we turn off that access. And you may want to look to the data packages that you use to see whether or not you've got that capability. This would never have been a problem for us and for many of you up until a couple of years ago. As you've been watching the pattern of examinations by the New York State Controller going through the school districts across the state, about a third of the way through the process, all of a sudden questions of internal security started to come up in every district's review. The first thing that many districts did in response to that was they went back and they cut off access for many people, including access for supervisors to be able to do such things as create documents or approve them. So you probably want to go back and revisit that while your staff is working on procedure manuals and you start to see the things that they're indicating to make sure that what happens if you have a staff member that is out is something that can be passed on to somebody else. And I don't think we can emphasize that overly much. Because sometimes when somebody's out and it's sudden, you have a task that's due immediately. Things like payroll come to mind. And you want to be ready and able to have people be able to do the work they need to do. This is going to be highly dependent upon the size of your office operation and whether you have backups. I have 2 people here in payroll. I'm in good shape unless both of them are out. And finding and training backup there was a very interesting exercise. Next slide, please. The trouble and the advantage of a procedure manual is that it is very detailed. And when you look at the list of things that are here, you realize that if somebody had to stop, and let's say you took a conference day and you told people, write a procedure manual, you would probably have a terrible mess at the end of the day, and it wouldn't be terribly useful. When you're looking at this kind of scope of work, you must take into mind, if you're going to undertake it, that this is a work of at least a year, and then it's going to require follow-up beyond that. And we'll begin to explain a little bit about that as we go forward. Imagine for a moment you were asked to write the tasks that you do. The first ones that'll probably come to mind are the ones that you're doing right now. And then you'll think about the important ones that other people depend upon you on. And 3 weeks from now, when you've got another task to do, that's when you slap yourself on the forehead and say, oh, I forgot to tell anybody about that one. Because the nature of our jobs seems to depend on the season, the week, the month, the quarter. And so we have to leave people with enough time to discover, to remember, and then to record. Next slide, please. Different people have different comfort levels about what a procedure manual would look like. When I came to this district, there was a payroll clerk who had been in the position for 22 years, and she had a blue canvas loose leaf that I think she had left over after her high school graduation. And in it was every stipulation that had ever been written, all of her listings each time she ran into a problem, and it was listed in an order and written in a way that she was the only one who could find the things in there when they were necessary. A procedure manual is only useful if the other person or people who pick it up can actually read it and find what they want quickly and without having to do a whole lot of homework. Our work is always changing, and so when people are doing procedures and after they've established the manual, from time to time they're going to need to go back and see whether or not what they wrote down still applies. And we envision here, and others I've talked to basically say that time needs to be set aside to remind people to do updates, and there needs to be checking and testing of it all the time. We have found that if we gave some organizational templates to our staff members, they could start down that path effectively, and then we were pleasantly surprised to find that groups in different areas found different things that they wanted to do or different ways of organizing it that were frequently better than anything we had thought of. And so we've attached for you two different templates and procedure manuals for two different departments in Hewlett-Woodmere, and you'll see they cover the same stuff, but they do it in a slightly different way. We have opted not to go the loose leaf route. All of our people have access to a shared directory inside of each department, and so our procedure manuals are developing by person's title inside of a central drive. This provides us with a lot of opportunities, including the ability for other people to look and share. And it also means we don't have to go searching in somebody's desk when we need a procedure when they're out. What we also found was that the manual itself didn't always help us navigate what to do when an emergency or even a planned illness arose. And so we came up to adopting something that others have used, which is really a task calendar. And this can go hand in hand with the procedures manual. In our case, some of our staff members have elected to do it through Microsoft Outlook. Some have printed calendars, and all of them have links telling people where to find it. So that if somebody comes in the case that I gave before, and I have a person who's going to be out, and they arrive on the first day, they can look and actually see the kinds of tasks that need to be handled right away. And they can look ahead and see what's coming up. And if they don't have the faintest idea of what to do about that, reach out to somebody else before the deadline appears. So calendaring for us has turned out to be very, very important. Next slide, please. Our district is a moderate-sized district, and we have more than 55 full-time clerical staff here, and a variety of people in non-clerical tasks who are also responsible for procedures, and some exempt employees. My span of control here covers quite a few of those, and I can honestly say that for many of them, I do not know all the details of what they do. I know the product that they produce, and I know when I see that product, but I don't know the day-to-day work. I can't see everything they do because certain things have been restricted to me by choice in terms of internal security. And so I don't even know the processes that an account clerk would follow in terms of some of the details. So this means that the people who write the procedure manual at the onset are the people who are doing the job. And down here, and I'm sure for all of you, most of those people have a full-time job. Next slide. So what we had to work through was how to find ways for people to work on the procedures and not give up their day jobs. And we were immediately besieged with questions from people. I'm an account clerk, so-and-so is an account clerk. Can we write the same procedure? And there's certainly opportunities for collaboration, but once you start looking at what people do, unless you have several people in a single department assigned to the same task, most people really don't have exactly the same assignments. And so you really, really need to be careful about that. Next slide, please. Our job here, and your job if you want to undertake this task, after you've convinced yourself that you really want it and the headaches that can go with it, is that you need to get your staff on board. And in order to do that, it has to be easy, it has to be digestible, it has to be something that they can work on a little bit when they've got a few moments, make a notation if they don't have much time to follow up on, and then get back to later. And we have found that it is really, really important to share results, to make sure that what they write makes sense. Because all of us write down our duties, if asked, in a form of shorthand. We tend to leave out the critical details. We want people to write documents that work. We want them to feel good about them. We want them to take pride in their work. One of the really nice offshoots of this is there is a whole lot more respect for people as others figure out what jobs they really do. Okay, so next slide, please. In my position, my summer is a very busy time. And with actually taking some vacation time that I dedicate in responsibility for other organizations, there's a block of time when I'm out of the office. And people have to fill in for me. That happens with our staff at all times. So we want to be able to have the information. We want to have trained the backups well in advance. We want to be able to do this in a non-threatening way. And to get the real buy-in to this, we decided to have some fun. Next slide. This one is an old standby, and you can adapt it any way you want to. It's based on telling people on their own to write the directions to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, which sounds nice and simple. And it reminds me, in some extent, to old-fashioned cookbooks, which started off by saying things like, take some chicken and cook it until it's done, which doesn't do a whole lot to help a novice. But we actually set up an opportunity for people to come together, for people to write down their directions for making a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, to have all of the fixings that are necessary out and available, and then to go and see what happens. Next slide. So we finished all the sets of instructions that everybody did, and we shuffled them up, and we put them in a pile, and we had the first person around the table take the first set of instructions and take the ingredients and follow it exactly. I remember on the very first one that was pulled, it started out with take a slice of bread and put it on the plate. That was easy. The second step was add the peanut butter. Since it didn't say to unscrew the lid or take any peanut butter out, the peanut butter jar went on the slice of bread. And you can see where that led in terms of what the final sandwich looked like. We went through 2 or 3 of those, and we stopped, and we asked them to rewrite the directions. We tried one round with the rewritten directions, and we got a whole lot better. Obviously, there were things that were left out, and then we said, okay, pair up together, share your directions with somebody else, and then we'll test one more. When two people collaborated, laughing all the way, and we did the test, we got a peanut butter and jelly sandwich that you could actually eat. Unfortunately, on that one, nobody specified how much peanut butter, so I don't know whether or not you could have eaten it without several gallons of milk, but there was a peanut butter and jelly sandwich that you could eat. Procedure manuals are a whole lot like the peanut butter and jelly sandwich. So next slide, please. As they're written, they need to be tested. It's easier to adjust them if you check them more often. I mentioned we post them online here, and we encourage people to pair up with somebody else who doesn't have the faintest idea of what their job is. Because if you don't know what the other person does, and you have to read what they're saying to do, it's very, very easy to point out where the gaps are. Everybody in each of our offices has a password that can get to this, so we don't have the issue of a paper procedure manual. And inside of our procedure manuals, for every task, we have the initials of somebody who can take over and do that task. And as I started saying to you earlier, and we'll review several times, if you're living in an electronic world, as most of us are, we have to make sure who's got the ability to grant access rights, to set them up in advance if we can, or to know who to turn to if we can't. We were doing some preparation here for in case the H1N1 virus required us to close down a building. And we thought we had everything pretty much in hand until we realized the potential that the only people who had the ability to turn on and off the access rights were in the same building. And if they were both out sick at the same time, we would have a wonderful plan and absolutely no way of implementing it. So give some thought to testing what you would do in different circumstances. Next slide. A procedure manual is never finished. I just finished updating my procedure manual on how to do the financial statements because I thought it was important that I know how to do the MD&A and notes without necessarily relying on my internal accountant. And I wanted to be able to document it. I did and followed the walk that I told everybody else, and I made that available to a group of people to look at. The first comment they said was, sure, you wrote this stuff up, and then you have all kinds of things in handwriting. You nicely scanned it onto the drive, and none of us can read what you wrote. The other comments were less pleasant than that. I have rewritten my procedures on how to do the financial, and that's really a good thing. It's important that you build the trust and confidence so that people will be willing to tell each other what they think and do it in a non-threatening way. And we sort of celebrate the funniest ones in here, and generally the people who laugh the loudest are the people who actually wrote the procedures that have been found to need a little bit more work. We found that in a number of cases, even though the procedures are only partially there, they help get us through the day. We had a staff member in another department here who was killed in an accident midway through last year in a terrible tragedy. And the work had to go on. The department was able to see the outline, even though it was nowhere near finished, with contact telephone numbers and other pieces. Interestingly enough, this person worked with civil service and all the appointments and everything else. So all of that contact information was there, and we can move ahead even in the midst of a tragedy. The one thing that has come out of this is that people who thought this was a threat, once they find out what I do, they'll find somebody else to do it, have found that that is not the case at all. The number of procedures and the depth and the detail of what they know is probably enough to dissuade almost anybody else from wanting to take the position. So part of helping people out is helping them realize that this is not placing any of their authority at risk or their job security at risk. We have these people because we need these people. You, as a manager, in reading the procedures, will have opportunities to see what looks like it's working. It may lead you to some ideas about how to do it separately. Frequently, as coworkers share with each other, people say, well, why do you do it this way? And the usual response is, because that's the way I do it. But as you probe, you find new ways and better ways of doing it. We've found some cases where people are duplicating work because they thought they needed to do it as well as somebody else, and we've been able to come up with some efficiencies. And we found one or two cases where when, in the end of the day, we looked at it, their workload was a little too light. More often, we found people whose workload was very, very full, and we wonder how they're able to get it all done. If we go to the next slide. We're about to go into, if you're not already there, a time of shrinking resources. Having the procedure manual, first of all, helps you justify what you have when the typical reaction is going to be cut some of that office staff. After all, you've got plenty of them and there's not too much for them to do. We may need to preserve class size, or we may need to preserve staff and supervision at the buildings, and we can get by with less. And knowing what people do and when they do it and how they do it and what their responsibilities are our first line of defense. But we will have shrinking resources. A good set of procedure manuals will help you think about how tasks can be reorganized if you have to scale back. Day in and day out, now that we've gone through most of the work, or what we think is most of the work, each of us feels a little bit better. When H1N1 was spreading and we told people, if you are showing the symptoms, we want you to stay out, and we want you to stay out until the guidelines say you come back, we actually had tools where we knew what we had to fill in. And that was a very, very useful and clear indicator of the importance of the task. I have found it fascinating to learn some of the things that some of my staff members do. And it has been a revelation to me. And I have shared that with them, and I've shared my appreciation with them, what they do. Most of us are blessed with having very, very caring and very, very effective staff members who mean well. There are others who, with a little help from us, can also be encouraged to do very well. So if we go to the next slide. We're going to be talking about what happens for those of you who want to participate in here, but in terms of getting Institute credit. But for many of you, we've given you a lot of information, and we want to bring it full circle, Mike and I. You don't have to focus on all of these areas: job description, organization chart, procedure manuals, all at once. You may decide that you want to emphasize one, and you may decide you may want to embellish it so it works for you. Or you may decide that you want to go and try one of these, whether you're going for credit or not. And so, for example, we gave you a separate piece, which is an Excel spreadsheet for just listing the calendar. We put this in Excel, and you're free to adapt it any way you want to, so that employees can leave it on screen, and when they pick up a new task, they just note it down. And when they note it down, in our case, we asked them who their backup is, and frequently it turned out there was no backup. We put it in Excel so that we can constantly sort this for them, either by date or by responsibility or by backup. And we told them that if all they got done in the beginning was being able to list the tasks they do, that was a great start. We also met with them and we shared a variety of templates for being able to record what their procedures are. And we've given you two of the simplified ones there. We gave them free rein inside of each department to embellish it or to consolidate some of the areas. And we encouraged them on one of their next tasks to take a little bit of time and start filling in what would be there and then stop and share it. And we gave them about 3 weeks to work through and develop one procedure. Just one. Their choice, any size, any complexity. To share it with some other people, to edit it a little bit, and then post it so all of us could see. And we did this so that they could realize that this task was not going to destroy their lives. So think about it. If you're willing to embark on the development of procedure manuals, it can be a real lifesaver for you and for your organization. It turns out, as we have found it to be a comfort to our staff. Some of them who would drag themselves in here no matter how sick they were or what was happening in their personal lives actually feel that they can not be here for a day or two and the world won't end. And as managers, we feel a whole lot better knowing the information is there and that knowing we can go on. Mike and I have covered a tremendous amount of information here. We'll talk a little bit about what needs to be done for people who want to turn in materials, and we're not asking you to develop an entire procedure manual, job description set, an organizational chart and turn it in a week, but to do something meaningful there. But at this point, it's a good time for questions and discussion.
Okay, thank you, Peter and Michael. Great information. Michelle, if you could just please remind people how they can ask a live question. And we actually have two, a question and a comment to discuss.
Thank you, Donna. Ladies and gentlemen, for those of you who would like to ask an audio question by your telephone, please press the number 7 followed by the pound key, and you'll be placed in a queue in the order received. Again, 7 pound to ask an audio question.
Okay, thank you. Peter, while you were talking about having a backup person and the idea of internal security, Michelle Matisse brought up a point, and she said in her business office consists of her and one other person, and that idea of a backup, the internal security, being aware of audit issues is a real problem.
Mm-hmm. And that is certainly true. And in very small offices, there needs to be an understanding of that. We have one funny response to that, maybe not so funny. We realized that we needed some additional security levels in terms of access to online banking. And running out of people to ask, we asked the superintendent to be the person who could grant rights. And in these days of tokens and all kinds of online things, everything was fine. We provided the training till the first time we needed him to do something. Whereupon it was, well, come down and walk through it with me, thereby defeating all of the internal security piece completely. So we have to be practical. Given your size, if you can't maintain internal security, I think what you need to be able to do is disclose that and then indicate what you're trying to do to make sure that the process is transparent or to show that you're verifying that what is done is proper and correct. That's probably the best thing that you can do.
Okay. Mike, do you have anything to add?
Not specifically on that, Don. I'm looking at another question that's on the screen here.
Yeah, we can go to that.
John
Fry. Yeah, he says, I have an accounts payable clerk that is not a confidential employee who, When I asked to work on a personnel project, it says it's not her job. She cannot work on tasks that have Social Security numbers since she's not confidential. And John says that his argument is that it is an assigned other task, and she disagrees. And John is saying, what now?
Maybe I'll start on that, Mike.
Okay.
Very few people understand what confidential means. Confidential in reality means that you're dealing with information such as negotiations or questions about retaining or disciplining personnel. Issues like that can't be shared. There are many things that school district officials encounter all the time that are confidential in that they can't be released. The clerk who's processing free and reduced price guidelines to grant students the right to that free and reduced price is seeing very confidential information about families and very sensitive. The person doing that does not have to be labeled confidential. A payroll clerk does not have to be a confidential employee, and they see a whole lot more than just Social Security numbers. They see liens and things of that nature. So part of it is just sharing with them what confidential means. They may need reassurance or they may need direction if they're just using that as an excuse. Mike, comments?
Well, I agree that there is some confusion usually about what a confidential and or managerial employee is. And as Peter has indicated, just because you're working with information that can be released does not necessarily mean that is confidential in the sense of the way the law reads on it. My take on this, though, would be that the employee can disagree, that's for sure, but that does not mean that the employee does not have to complete the task when asked. What we have here is, in Schenectady and other places I've worked at, is a situation where you certainly can disagree with me, but I'm the supervisor. I'm asking you to do this as long as it's not illegal or out of line or something of that nature. You're to do the work and then go to the necessary procedure, whatever it is, if it's a union person, a grievance procedure, and we'll talk about it in that form. But it's certainly the employee, at least in my experience, does not have the opportunity to just disagree or not do the task when asked.
Okay, thank you. Any audio questions?
No audio questions on cue.
Okay. Well, we have about 2 minutes, and we can do a wrap-up since there are no other questions that have come in. So, Michael, do you want to talk about some maybe important points, things you'd like people to remember?
Yes, I think that what we tried to cover on the couple parts that I covered today on first of all on the job descriptions is number one, make the distinction between employees and independent contractors, and then we can talk about job descriptions, make sure that they certainly depict what you want your employee to do in a particular job and situation. Make sure that all of the important points that we covered here today are included on the job descriptions, and certainly refer back to and know that a job description is very important. And again, this is shown by the New York State Education Department evaluation checklist, and so make sure that you cover that. Check your local civil service organization commission website for important information. And then when we got into organization charts, I think the big thing here is to remember that, yes, we need an organization chart. It's required by the evaluation at the New York State Education Department. It is required for a number of things that we do in school districts. But remember that it is a formal indication of the chart of the way things flow in an organization, not necessarily the informal. And sometimes the informal is a lot stronger than the formal. So we always have to be careful when we're looking at organization charts to understand that there are probably other things happening not depicted in that chart.
Okay, and
I'll
Peter?
leave it at that for today.
Okay, thank you. And Peter, a quick wrap-up?
We always would like to be able to know what different people do and how they do it. It's not a task that's accomplished quickly and easily. In order to do it, it needs to be done in small bites, and you have to find a way to make it important and useful for the people who are doing the baseline work, the actual employees who are describing what they do. If you can make it fun and if you can make it a good shared experience, they will participate in it easily, they will compete to get it done, and they will take great pride in the results.
Okay, well, thank you very much to the two of you. I think this has been very informational. Those of you who are on this webinar, I would encourage you to take a look at the others two that are coming up that go along with this. One is on failing to plan, planning to fail, and the other is talking about special interest groups. Now, those dates are likely to change, so I would encourage you to take a look at the reporter notes that come to you on a regular basis from NIASBO and to go to the website. And look forward to having you on those webinars, and thank you very much for joining us, and have a great weekend.
Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes today's New York State ASBO webinar. Thank you for attending.
The moderator has ended the conference. Goodbye. Thank you for calling.